So just to share a little bit of the intention behind this call, I'm sure many of us are in a spot right now where our week does not look like what we expected it to look 2 weeks ago. Everything is sort of in the unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty in the air. And so on behalf of the Sullivan Foundation, we wanted to just start hosting some regular dialogues, conversations where we can chat with folks who are leading a whole bunch of creative organizations and companies as social entrepreneurs to just kind of get their insight on what are they doing in a time like this and how are they choosing to respond. So today, this is the first of a hopefully ongoing series. We'll be doing this every Wednesday and Friday moving forward. But we've got Tony and Jasmine with us, who are two very dear friends that have helped out with some previous Sullivan Foundation programming over the past few years. And so super excited that they get to kick off the series with us around how do we navigate the unknown, right? What does it look like to move forward from here? What are some tips and tricks that they can share? And what are they hearing in their own pockets of the world? So what we're going to do, just to give you a bit of orientation for the call, fairly simply, we're going to do some connection and then we'll do some content. So we'll kick things off with Jasmine and Tony just giving us a quick teaser of who they are and the work that they do in the world. And then we'll go into this connection period. So we'll break everybody out into quick breakout rooms, about 3 people or so per breakout room, just to share about how this is impacting you, get to meet some of the other people on the call and across the Sullivan network. And then coming out of those breakout rooms, we'll have a chance to ask Tony and Jasmine a bunch of questions about how is this impacting them? How are they choosing to respond? So whatever questions are really prevalent for you right now, you're welcome to share that with them after that time. So that'll be a bit of our content chunk. So that's a bit of our aim for today. So I'm going to kick things off by passing it over to Jasmine to start a little bit. And I'm going to stop our screen share here so that we can see you in full screen. So yeah, Jasmine, if you want to feel free to unmute yourself and take a couple minutes just to share who you are, what you're doing in the world, give some context for folks on the call.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Jasmine. I hope everybody is feeling safe and everybody is healthy, and your friends and family are healthy as well. So yeah, I'm Jasmine. I am currently in Chicago. I'm from the Quad Cities, Rock Island, Illinois. I'm 24 years old. I was 15 when I started my nonprofit. It's called Love Girls Magazine. The love stands for lead, overcome, value, and empower. And I originally started it after my best friend was being bullied online. It was back during the kind of height of the cyberbullying crisis. So the magazine is for girls by girls, 13 to 25. They do all the writing, the photography, the event planning. And it's just a place that girls can go and share their stories and showcase their successes, and really have a platform to use their voice. So that's what I've been doing since I was 15. And I currently work at Peace First. So that is a nonprofit that I do storytelling and a little bit of, I dabble in fundraising there as well. So Peace First is a nonprofit that works with global youth 13 to 25 to start their own social innovation projects.
Okay.
Whatever they care about in the world, they start projects around it. So that's how actually Tony and I got to meet. We were both Peace First fellows. So yeah, that's like a little snippet about me. And I'll let Tony go next and share something about him.
Can you all hear me okay? Okay, cool. I see the thumbs up. Hi, my name's Tony Weaver Jr. I'm really proud to be here with you all today, have the chance to talk to you a little bit. Just for context, I am normally a glasses wearer, but if there's anything that Zoom has taught me, it is that my glasses give off terrible glare on video chat. So I can't actually see anybody, which may help because it may make me feel a little bit more comfortable because I literally can't see anybody's reactions or anything like that. But glad to be here with my words anyway. I run an organization called Weird Enough Productions, and at Weird Enough, what we do is we use superheroes and comic books for literacy and social emotional learning in elementary, middle, and high schools around the country. Weird Enough, we have an original comic series that we developed called The Uncommons that tells a story of 5 unlikely outsiders that have to save each other to save the world. What we do is we take the comic and we partner it with lesson plans, activities, and curricula that really engage students around finding what makes them uncommon and using that to make a positive impact in their communities. So that's a little bit of work about Weird Enough. We're engaged with schools and kind of any place where youth gather across about 14 states. And I'm really working hard to improve representation and help young people recognize the agency that they have to make the world better.
Unmute myself. Cool. Thanks, Tony and Jasmine, for sharing a bit. So that gives a little bit of context. One of the reasons we wanted to invite them onto this call is they both are really involved in media and storytelling and how do you tell really creative narratives. And so in a time like this, right, where our narrative is all thrown in the air, I thought it might be really interesting to kick things off with Jasmine and Tony on here. To give one more bit of context for those who might be unfamiliar with the Sullivan Foundation, my name is Spud. I'm one of the program directors for a lot of our student events and programming across the network. We are a foundation that are based in the American Southeast, and so we support students and universities and faculty and staff who are interested in service and social entrepreneurship and want to make a creative dent in their communities. And so we put on all kinds of different programming. Typically those are in person, and obviously a lot of things are shifting into the virtual space. And so we thought that this is one contribution that we might be able to put out there. So there are a whole bunch of organizations and universities that are a part of our network. And so if you're looking for more information, you're welcome to go to sullivanfdn.org. And there's a lot of details on there. This call will also be recorded on there for some reference points for later on. So if you need to send anybody to it, we'll have that posted on the website for everybody. So what I would love to do here next is to jump into some small group discussions. And hopefully everybody can see the shared screen that just popped up. What I'm going to invite all of us to do is jump into small groups of roughly 3 people or so. And I'd love you to take 10 or so minutes with your small group just to discuss how has all of the uncertainty of COVID-19 most meaningfully shifted the norms in your life, right? So what looks differently from a meaningful perspective, right? So there might be things that are just really apparent, but I want you to go one layer deeper than that. So with all the COVID-19 uncertainty in the world, what has really meaningfully shifted for you and your lives? So take about 10 or so minutes. I will give people a heads up when we have about 60 seconds or so, and then we'll bring people back into the main group. And after that time, that's when we can really ping some questions back and forth with Jasmine and Tony and learn a little bit more about their work and how they're responding in this time. So if you have any questions at any point, feel free to chat me in the chat box, and I'm happy to kind of help guide people if you get stuck in the next few steps. But hopefully folks in your breakout room will help be able to guide things if you're looking for some guidance here. So I will post that question in the chat box. Again, how has the recent COVID-19 uncertainty most meaningfully shifted norms in your life? As a reminder, when you go into the breakout rooms, be sure to unmute yourself and turn your video on if it's not, just so folks can have as much of a personal connection as they can during this time. So with that, let me kick off breakout rooms here. Cool, so you will get an invite here in a few seconds. Just click the big link that pops up on your Zoom screen and you should be good to go. Cool, so we've got everybody back. You've been muted just as an FYI, so hopefully that was good. On a quick thermometer scale, was that helpful getting to connect and check in with folks? Cool. Awesome. So what I would love for folks to do is if you could open the chat box. I would love everyone, before we dive into the conversation of what Tony and Jasmine are up to and maybe some tips and tricks they have, I'd love for everybody to take 30 seconds and think of what's one question that you're really curious to pursue that you might want to drop into the chat box that we can kind of dig into. And we can pose that to Tony and Jasmine, but we can always open it up to others on the call. They might have some insights as well. So take about 15, 20 seconds or so here just to think about what's a question that you're curious to dive into. And keep in mind some of the context that Tony and Jasmine are working in the space of creative social entrepreneurship, the role that media and storytelling play, so how that might inform some of the questions that we have. And then I'm going to invite everybody to share their question at once. So go ahead and type your question, but don't hit enter quite yet. So we're going to wait for everybody to put their question or their curiosity. Just type it in the chat box. And then on the count of 3, I'll invite everybody to share it all at once. Cool. So hopefully you've got something in there. So on the count of 3, I just want you to hit enter. We'll do kind of a big brain dump of some of the questions that we've got going on. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Awesome. And obviously we can keep adding to this as the conversation goes on. Feel free to take a look through some of the questions of what others are curious about. In the meantime, I'm going to pose a question out to Tony and Jasmine, and I'm going to let either of you take this. So feel free to bounce this back and forth. But I'm just curious how your life currently looks different with the work that you're doing specifically, right? So you guys are in the business of constantly pivoting and adapting and coming up with new solutions and probably a multitude of roles. And so I'm curious, what pivots have you had to make in your own work? So maybe give us some context of what life looked like a month or 2 ago and what it's currently looking like in terms of the offerings and the services that you're going. So just make sure to unmute yourself, and we'll kick off with that question, and then we'll dive into some of the ones in the chat box.
For me, I'd say that the difference in terms of the work that we're doing, the thing that's changed the most is the approach, if that makes sense. So I do a lot of work in education. So even though I'm really vested in media and narrative change and storytelling, the education space, the public education system, working with educators and working with students in an educational context is the way that we're kind of able to scale and measure our impact. And I think that prior to all of this, we had received a lot of guidance from our mentors and people that we work with around, well, are you working with districts? Are you working with schools? Are you working with systems and things like that? But from the minute all of this happened and we recognize all of these shifts taking place, my immediate thought was the people that need us most right now are the teachers. So pretty early on, so about 45 states have closed school right now. Last week, that number was only 19. As that number started to climb up, we went and made about 400 pages worth of comics, lesson plans, activities, and projects free for teachers and free for caregivers in order to make sure that they had access to materials. And right now, my entire thought process is how do we support teachers? Like that's all my work now. I spend my day on the phone with teachers, figuring out what problems they're dealing with and addressing so that we can be helpful. That's my whole, I think that's the thing that shifted most about my work. Very often in social entrepreneurship, if your organization has a social goal, they treat it like it's less of a real business. So there's a little bit of a pressure for you as an individual to say, well, I'm getting the numbers. Here's my sales pipeline. Here's what I'm doing. I'm a real business. I promise I'm real. And I think that with everything that's happened, I've kind of shed that facade of, listen, I'm not trying to convince anybody that, like, I'm not trying to win a Shark Tank pitch right now. What I'm really focused on is making sure that my community has what it needs and that the impact is there. So, and for us, that looks like lots of individual attention and relationship building with teachers.
Awesome. Jasmine, how about yourself? What big pivots have you had to make recently?
I think both with Love Girls and with Peace First, what we've really had to do is focus on 2 things, which is safety for everybody involved, especially our young people, and moving digitally to respond to the needs of the young people that we serve. So for Peace First specifically, I think that moving quickly to respond to all of the young people who are looking for resources to help their communities. In our small group, we were talking about Peace First a little bit more in depth in the work that we do around young people to provide them with resources to start their own social innovation projects. Because of COVID and the effects that have been happening around COVID, we started what we call a rapid response grant to get up to $250 into the hands of young people 13 to 25 to start their social innovation project, but also to do it safely. So usually young people could have projects around like community building, bringing tons of people together, handing out supplies, but with COVID and the restrictions around what they can do, they've really had to get innovative with their solutions. And in terms of the magazine, what we've been really focused on is we actually had to cancel one of our biggest event of the year. It's called the Love Awards, and we were super excited, but it's better to keep our community safe. But what we can do to continue to have engagement through our community, and we're thinking about how we can get girl stories online, how we can showcase girls via video, and just keeping everybody safe and healthy. I think that those two are probably our biggest things right now.
Cool. I'm going to pose one more question out here, and then I'm going to invite actually anybody in the group here to feel free to chime in. So just unmute yourself if you have a follow-up question that you want to dig into. But because we're talking a lot about story and narrative, and that's part of the nature of your work, I'm curious for both of you, what is a story that you hope emerges 1 year from now? Right, so we've fast track and we're sitting in this time in 2021, right, a year from today. What is the story that you hope has emerged? And thinking about the context of the people that you serve and like the niche communities that you're a part of, what do you feel like you're specifically doing to help that story come to fruition? So thinking about what is that story that you hope we're telling folks around us and that your organizations are helping to promote in some way. So what does that story look like, and what are you guys doing to take the first steps in that direction?
I think for me, if I had to like think about the headlines a year in the future, I hope that they would say something about how young women, young people, particularly young women of color, were a part of the healing, were a part of the solution throughout this time. I think that I really want the narratives and the stories of young people from all different walks of life to be really lifted up as leaders and as people who are capable of creating real positive change in our community, not just locally but globally, really helping out and making a difference. That's the goal.
Cool.
If I give a slightly pessimistic answer, I would say that it's hard for me to conceptualize what that story would look like ideally, just because right now I think that what we're seeing are all of the bad parts of storytelling, in the sense that people have really developed a strong way to game the media cycle. And when all you have to do is sit at home and look at what's happening online, those effects become a lot more widespread. Like an example that I'll use is Zoom. So like we're on Zoom right now, we're using Zoom. Everybody's talking about Zoom, age of Zoom. There's an organization called freeconferencecall.com that literally for the last 2 decades has been doing free conference calls and video calls, has all these features, and it's been free the whole time. People started shifting to teleworking and remote working. Zoom saw an opportunity. They hit the press first, and now they're reaping all of those benefits. Even though Free Conference Call as an organization, if we were going to categorize it, was the organization that was doing the work before it was cool. And I feel like a lot of the stories that we're seeing right now are organizations that haven't been doing the work, but know how to leverage the media cycle now that it's a little trendy. So we get more stories about celebrities singing things on their Instagram story than we do about people that are actually in the community and working. If I had any hope, it would be that a year from now, we've learned to see through some of these vanity stories and really focus on the impact of people's actions and not just what headlines are being uplifted.
Awesome. I'm seeing a few hands waving. For those who are all a part of the Sullivan community, one of our cultural norms when we gather together is if something really resonates with you, you just kind of fan yourself like, oh yeah, I'm feeling that. That feels hot. So if at any point, right, there's a response that you're feeling, feel free to give the speaker a little bit of love that way. I want to open it up for others who might have questions that they want to kind of pose to Tony and Jasmine, and then we can dive into some of the questions in the chat box. So feel free to shed some light on some of the questions that you shared there.
I'll go first, Spud.
Yeah, go for it.
First of all, this is awesome, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to connect with everybody from the other side of the world. So my question is for both you guys. Has there been a point where you've been thinking, I've got to do this, I've got to step up, or I've got to put this out into the world, and been maybe personally conflicted around, is this the right time? Who's going to listen to me? How am I going to get the cut through? And I don't want to be seen as a vanity project, to your point. And what's made you take the leap?
So I think that in my experience, there's always, for me, some sort of imposter syndrome or something in my head that says, you really need to do what you're doing. Is there a reason that particularly has to be you? Like, does it have to be you? And I think that there are healthy ways to deal with that. My way of dealing with it might not be as healthy, but it's pretty effective. People say that you shouldn't compare yourself to others, but I would say that rather than it being a self-comparison, I try to give myself the same grace that I give others, if that makes sense. So for example, I have a friend who's a journalist that writes stories. And even if she wrote a story in October, I can guarantee you she's going to tweet the link out for the story next week. And if that was me personally, I'd think to myself, well, I posted it in October. It happened in October. I don't want anybody to feel weird about the fact that I'm posting something from October. But for her, since I'm her friend, I'm like, whatever you worked hard on, I want to support it, click it, and share it as many times as possible. So put that in front of me. I don't care if it's from a year ago. You post it. I'll be here to support you. And it makes me think about the fact that sometimes we don't give ourselves the same level of grace that we give the people around us. When working in social enterprise and when working on something that requires an impact, you have to show grace to yourself first, the same level of grace and the same level of care that you want to show to the communities that you care about. You have to show that to yourself as well. So for me, I get over those things by thinking to myself, there are other people that are doing this. Like the conversation is gonna happen regardless. The question is, am I going to be a part of the conversation? And when I look at what other people are contributing to the conversation, sometimes my thought process tells me what you have to say is significantly cooler than what they've been blabbing on about for the last 12 weeks. So by all means, dive in.
Imposter syndrome really resonates with me, so I fan myself on that one. I distinctly remember being about 17 or 18 years old. So I am a young Black woman, and my grandma always told me, you already have 2 strikes against you. You're Black and you're a woman. And then I was like, well, it might as well be 3 because I'm also under the age of 30, which also has its disadvantages. And I remember I had been doing the magazine for about 3 years, and it had been going really well, unusually well. It kind of caught on to my community really quickly, and I found a lot of support. And there's a building in my community. It's pink. It used to be a restaurant. And I was like, I dream of having the magazine's headquarters be in this pink building. I want this pink building right here. And so I went to City Hall to pay a parking ticket. And I was like, I'm just going to inquire about this building because it's been abandoned for a while. Nobody's in it. And I just want to know. And so I go in about 17 or 18 years old. And the lady at the front desk kind of was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm interested in a building. It's pink. I want to buy it. I want to put my headquarters in there. And she kind of looked at me for a really long time. And she kind of like turned her head, was confused. And then she got up and she went to the back. And I remember hearing her say, she couldn't see me, but I could hear her. And she was like, there's a little Black girl inquiring about a building. And I think that was that moment that you were talking about, that moment of uncertainty. Like, wait, like, am I not supposed to be asking about the pink building? It was like one of those moments where I guess I hadn't considered my limitations in a while up until that point. And that was probably the first time since I had started the magazine where I really, like, self-doubt really sunk in. And it took a while actually to bring myself out of that moment. And I saw your question about what resonated with girls around the world at this time. And I think it's being scared to do things, feeling that imposter syndrome, acknowledging it, and then doing whatever it is that I want to do anyways, and finding a way to make it work. And yeah, that's one of those lessons that I will continue to learn probably for the rest of my life. But that's that moment that kind of popped up into my head when you asked that question. So,
Jasmine, what happened with the building?
So it's still it's in foreclosure. I still want it. It's still there. There's actually 2 buildings that I want now, but hopefully one day I can, I don't know, crowdfund and get some money so that we can put some computers in there and like a photo studio and a writing and mentor space for young people in my community. That's the dream. Yeah. Thank you.
This is your time. This is your time. Go get the pink building.
Cool. Are there others out there that have questions or curiosities that you want to really bring forward? Or a question that you saw in the chat that you really want to dive into a little bit?
I have a question. I don't know if I guess it's the right question to ask because it's my question, but I'm at least my thought right now is, how do I resolve my challenges and how do I get back on track and have the life of creation and authenticity that I want to have and work towards those goals and bring service to others. I can't help but also thinking like, okay, but how do I do that without changing the framework so hard so that when we're back to seeing each other again, that it won't be like an abrupt change once again. Yeah, so I don't know if you can relate that to the work that you're doing and if you've considered that at all.
So my argument would be that the path to meaningful experiences is not a static path. It winds and it changes all the time. So my argument would be that even if we were in circumstances that weren't as uncommon as what we are currently dealing with, there would still be a need for some sort of change or shift in order for you to find what you're looking for, rather than looking at this as an immediate, like, kind of 180 or total shift. I would say looking at it as just another wind on that path, going towards whatever that goal is. I feel as though if your goal is clear and you've laid out for yourself exactly what that thing is, navigating to it, even if it takes a different way, isn't going to take you off path. So for us, my goal is that I want to impact and empower students with comic books. Cool, that makes sense. You make the comic books, you distribute them through the education system, make sure educators get their hands on them. Suddenly, school, traditionally, the dynamic of it is changing and shifting. It doesn't happen in the way that we're expecting it to. That's fine, because now I get to say, okay, well, where are the students? They're going to be learning from somebody. How do I get those materials to them? It's just that now those materials are going to be digitally distributed to them via Clever or Schoology or Canvas, instead of a teacher handing them a packet or pulling out or putting something on a projector. My overall goal and the way I go about that goal doesn't change significantly just because I make sure it's easier for that teacher to get it on Schoology instead of assuming that they'll have it on a projector in a classroom full of 20 people. Does that make sense?
Tony, can I dig one layer deeper into that? I want to like peel inside your head. So when you started hearing the news of a bunch of schools are no longer going to be physically gathering, can you bring us to the moment of when you heard that news, and how did you process that? Were you super excited, here's a moment to pivot, and now I'm going to come up with all these different delivery mechanisms? Or did you have a moment of sort of like panic? Did you have to go on a walk? Like, just help us process, what were you thinking and processing when you heard the news of, ooh, I'm at a pivot on my journey right now, and I need to adapt to what that looks like?
So I think that there was certainly a moment of panic, because as an organization, we've spent so much time trying to learn how to play by education's rules. So when I entered the space, my thought process was, I want to impact students and I want to empower teachers. I don't care how it looks. I don't care what words you put on it. I want to impact students and I want to empower teachers. That's my goal. In our time in the education space, I had to be taught that, well, if you want to impact students and empower the teacher, you have to make sure that the principal feels confident about including it in their building. In order for the principal to feel confident about including it in their building, you have to make sure that you're checking off whatever the district leader is measuring them on or evaluating them on. So in order to help the kid, I have to step away from the kid and focus on the teacher. And in order to help the teacher and empower the teacher, I have to go learn what the teacher's boss is looking for. And to learn what the teacher's boss is looking for, I have to learn what the teacher's boss's boss is looking for. And to make sure that I do that effectively, I have to spend thousands of dollars to go pop up at conferences where I can talk to these people and get candid feedback from them. And once I get the feedback from them, I have to take what was initially packaged for the student and talk about it in a way that resonates with the building leader and the building leader's leader in a way that doesn't alienate the teacher. And if I want to do that, I have to get it in their budget cycle. And if I want to get it in their budget cycle, I have to spend 4 to 6 months talking to them and engaging with them and letting them know that what we're doing is worthwhile before they're even willing to get on a phone call with me. And I've spent the last year adjusting to that process, despite the blow to morale that it is. Despite the fact that I don't get to spend as much time in the classroom that I want to, I spent so much time shifting to that. And then to find out that all of that crumbles because now the people that I've spent months trying to get on the phone with have other things that they have to focus on. How are their kids going to eat? How are they distributing devices? How are they making sure that people have broadband? How are they communicating with teachers? What does their board need? Suddenly, the people that I shifted my entire structure to talk to have 99 problems in the world before they in any way, shape, or form are thinking about me. And initially that made me panic. But what I realized in that moment is that they want to help their community just as much as I want to help their community. And the question then becomes, how do I position myself in a way where it becomes easy for me to help them? And I think that what helps is that, like, I grew up with educators. So my grandma was a lunch lady for 30 years. My mom was a teacher, assistant principal, and is now at the district level. And it makes it, growing up and seeing the different ways that they helped young people in the community that they care about made me go, okay, this is an opportunity to make sure that I'm there for them, and recognizing that I am only one part of this process. How can I make my part of the process as stress-free as possible so that they can go do the work that they want to do. So it was stressful at first, but I looked at the shift as an opportunity to rewrite the rules, which made me pretty happy because I didn't like the way that the rules were set out in the first place.
I love that. I think that's such an important point, that such entrepreneurs are always trying to adapt and tweak the rules of the system. And the fact that all of the rules have been upended, here's an opportunity to now come in and introduce some alternative approaches. So Jasmine, I see you nodding your head. I'm curious what you're thinking on that side.
Yeah, Tony nailed it. Everything that I had down it's basically echoing what he said. For me, I responded in a similar way. There was a reactiveness, a panic almost, in the work that we were doing. And so I just wrote down some questions that I asked myself, so that I can ask you as well. And I asked myself, what does our foundation look like? The foundation of the work that we do. What does it look like? And what can we permanently change to avoid having to have such a huge shift in the future when things like this pop up? And then also, who are we serving really? Like, who are we really serving? So with the magazine, we have advertisers and we have partners who are amazing and supportive and necessary to all of the work that we do. But as I started to react, and as me and the girls and the board all started to think through how we were going to respond, it became, who are we serving? Are we serving our advertisers and our partners, or are we serving our young people? Are we serving our girls? And I think that those questions are really what we had to ask ourselves as we try to figure out a strategy on how to shift, to still do the work that we need to do and still do the work to be helpful, but also to make sure that as an organization, our foundation was strong, so that when something like this happens again, or something else completely different happens, that we're better equipped to answer and respond. So yeah, definitely echoing a lot of the points that Tony made, but those are the questions that I asked myself.
Sorry about that. My internet crashed. Is everybody still there?
Yeah.
Couldn't
even
All right. Navigating the unknown, right? In live time here. Sorry if I missed a little bit of what you said there, Jasmine. But
no, you're good.
I'm sure it was full of golden wisdom. So I want to be mindful of time. We have about 5 minutes left. And so I'm curious if anybody else has a really pressing question that they want to sneak in here. Otherwise, I'd love to leave it with what's a tip or trick or an offer that Jasmine might have. So before we get to that point, does anyone have one last question they'd love to pose to them before we close things at the top of the hour?
It's more about not a question directly to them, but would Tony and Jasmine be happy for me to share the love? Can we share a photo on LinkedIn about what you guys are doing? I took a couple of photos of you speaking. Would that be okay? Are you open for business on the other side of the world? Tony can, but what you do is awesome, both of you, and kudos to you both. Do you want to be connecting people in this side of the world in Australia?
Yes and yes, I'm with you.
So may I share, and Tony, one thing I heard you said that teachers are your go-to, your tribe at the moment. I'm a 45-year-old dad. I've got 3 kids, okay, 2 daughters and a son, 11 and 9. I'm in lots of WhatsApp message groups at the moment. There isn't a parent out there who is not struggling with, like, how do I engage my kids? I want to be the coolest parent that shares the coolest thing for your kids. So there's this war going on with the parents. You guys do some cool things. So I think you've got a whole bunch of, particularly dads. So I work from home. I'm used to this. There's a whole bunch of dads that are suddenly home going, oh my God, how do I cope mentally with being around my kids? But also, I've no idea how to do cool stuff with my kids. So both of your businesses have another huge market. So I would suggest, and what you said about death by 1,000 cuts, Tony, you're trying to go through the system. You guys have an opportunity to rewrite and cut through straight away.
I appreciate that.
Keep doing it. It's amazing.
So let's use that as our final question here. What's one cool thing that you can offer to this group, right? That we can use to elevate the work you're doing, to get involved, or something that we can just apply to our own work? If there was that one thing you guys could share, what would that be?
So in terms of the work, so on our website, www.weirdenough.com, all of the comics are there. You can click to get to the comics or click to get to the educational materials. And I think those are pretty cool to kind of go over in a classroom setting, or to read with your little one, with your kids if they're home with you. What I would also say is something that's really helped me, even though I'm not practicing what I preach. A chair with back support would be very helpful right now. A chair with back support. That's a tip that I leave for everybody. If you're going to be working from home remotely, get a chair with lumbar support. It's worth it. It's worth it.
Words of wisdom. Jasmine, what do you got?
No, I agree with that. I'm sitting on a stool, and so that really resonated with me just now, because I'm like back.
Yo.
So for Love Girls in particular, you guys can support digitally. All of our stories are on lovegirlsmagazine.com. We do have a podcast. We have 2 seasons worth of content that you guys can listen to. It's Love Girls, the podcast. I co-host it with my good friend and a former Miss Iowa 2018, Michaela Hughes-Shaw. And if you have any young people in your life at home, or any young people you know of, 13 to 25, encourage them to apply for a rapid response mini grant through Peace First. It's up to $250 to help start their own project to alleviate some of the effects of COVID. And I think that personally, I really encourage everybody to engage in self-care. Please take care of yourself. I know that, social entrepreneurship, a lot of times our minds are always racing and running, and we want to help and we want to do good work, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. So please take care of yourself and stay safe and healthy. That's my my 2 cents.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for jumping on here. I want to be mindful of folks' time. Just as a heads up, if this was life-giving to you and is filling your cup, as Jasmine said, we're going to be offering these interactive webinars and discussions every Wednesday and Friday for the foreseeable future, right? As long as there's a lot of unknown in the world, we hope to offer this as just one place that people can drop into to have these discussions. So this upcoming Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll have Ajax from Magnolia Yoga and Tessa Zimmerman from Asset Education talking about the role that both health and well-being and the education system, how those two intersect. So if you really need some personal nourishment, it'll be a really good conversation happening 5 o'clock Eastern Time this upcoming Friday. So I just want to send a big thank you to Tony and Jasmine for joining us, sharing a little bit of what's going on in your world. And thanks to everybody else who was joining today. I really appreciate that you can jump on for a bit of a lunch hour, or in Chalky's case, evening hour. So thank you so much, guys, for coming on. And we will see you hopefully on Friday.
Thank you so much. You all have a great day.
Thank you, Spud. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Spud. Thanks, guys. Tony, thanks, Jazz.
See y'all.